north of the A27. It hasn't been much mentioned tonight, but I'm extremely concerned about access to the south because the traffic lights won't be there any longer. I don't know what the walkers, the cyclists, the pedestrians and so on will do when they get to those traffic lights.
This is at Coombs we're talking about, the road from Coombs.
Yes, where the airport, where the traffic lights are at the airport. That is all going to be closed off. You may be able to turn left out of the Coombs Road, but I'm also very concerned about emergency vehicles getting anywhere near along the Coombs Road, because it is often used when the 283 has its problems, which it does every single day, and the Coombs Road is used as a rat run through to get to Stenning and elsewhere. And if we cannot get our emergency vehicles through, there is no way that we can cross from the north to the south. If you happen to come to the college and want to get to a bus stop, you can't do it. You cannot get across the road. There has been no provision for that at all. And it is a very serious matter. But that the emergency vehicles have got to go in both directions. And I do think we do need to really think about that, because it hasn't been thought about. Thank you.
Are you broken it?
One. One, two. Is that better? Yes. I've got a question that I think is aimed at Tim, because you're a politician, at James, because you have council responsibility, and at us as well. Is there a better way of achieving planning? Because there seems to be a conflict between stakeholders and shareholders. We're stakeholders because we live here, and shareholders of companies don't always necessarily live in the area that development is going to happen. And it strikes me that these meetings happen a little bit late in the process. James, you've been doing this for 30 years, you've told us you did for 30 years. You've witnessed this time after time after time. Is there a way, and you can share it with us privately, with anybody else, is there a way of achieving the things that we need, because we are experts, we're not technical experts, but local experts, we work, we travel, we live. Is there a way of achieving what we need and what developers need, which is to make a little bit of money? If there is a way, could you tell us please what it is, and Tim, your comments too? Yes.
Can we take the gentleman right down in the corner, and then we'll come back and take these two here, and then we'll have some responses. And don't break the microphone.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that I am a supporter of Brighton and Hove Football Club. But I want to say that what Martin said earlier tonight, totally disagree. I think it's totally irresponsible what Brighton and Hove Football Club are doing to our area. Absolutely not acceptable. And it's the football club's decision to include IKEA. Nobody else is saying you must take IKEA. They could cast about for other candidates, but they're not, for the very reason that other people have said, and that is that they see that there's big bucks to be made by inviting a firm like IKEA. It's all about the profit levels that the club is going to make out of this in order to pay the big bucks for their big stars. Following on from that, I mean, we're all. I took 35 minutes coming over from Southwick to get here, and
you did well.
I did very well indeed. And I think that the other problem that hasn't been mentioned is that, yes, Martin did say, oh well, up until about 10 o'clock you won't have a problem. Yeah, what about between 10 o'clock and 12 o'clock, which is at the moment relatively free-flowing, but not if it's an IKEA. And what about in the afternoon, after the rush hour at midday? All those shoulder times will be taken up by punters going to IKEA. It's going to totally gridlock the area, and it can't but get worse as IKEA are probably thinking about it in terms of expansion. So I think that...
Last point, quick one.
Last point is that there has been a lot of attention focused on the club's plans, but the local plan, which has been referred to, is clearly not fit. And what we need to do, we must have councillors. I know we've got councillors here. There are councillors who are on the planning committee, and I really think we should put them on the spot over this local plan, because clearly the local plan isn't taking into account the wishes of local people. And I think that that's the crucial thing that Martin and the Tory council don't seem to be aware of, and it really needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, can we take James? Do you want to give your microphone there? I was going to go ladies first, but anyway.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon.
Hi, good evening. As a resident of Shoreham, I am also horrified at the prospect of IKEA coming. I actually live on Mill Hill and have a bird's eye view of the traffic on the A27, and I can't imagine how anyone thinks IKEA is a good idea. Obviously, a lot of people have said that already. My point this evening is, as a mother of 2 primary school age children, there was mention before there'd be 600 houses and a school either on the site or schools in Shoreham or Lancing will be expanded to cope with the primary age. But my concern is obviously my kids will soon be looking at secondary school, and already I know that my kids can't go to school in Shoreham. If there are going to be 600 houses with more children, what provision is there for secondary school places?
I appreciate we have a national housing shortage which must be addressed. But I'm interested to know how the projected housing requirement was arrived at. How did they come up with, was it 8,500? 5.5. How did they come up with the figure of 5,500 for this area? On what basis was this calculation made?
Okay, James, can you take that and a few other points, please?
Yes, I think that point came up earlier as well. So the government gives us certain guidelines about how to assess future housing needs. It is based on projections, as these things always are, in terms of birth rate projections, household size, inward and outward migration. There's a whole series of things that we have to assess to come up with what the future housing requirements are. And since 2011, we used to have planning done on a regional basis. We had a South East plan. Since 2011 and the Localism Act, it's now up to each local authority to try to meet its future housing requirements. On the question of how do we come up with the figure, today in Parliament there was an announcement about trying to standardise the approach across the country, because each local authority has to interpret the guidance, and different authorities interpret it in different ways. Interestingly, from the announcement today, I've just seen a couple of headlines, and I was just checking. I haven't actually read the full paper, but it was to have a standard approach. But one of the headlines that I've seen in the professional papers, planning magazines, is that that's likely to increase everyone's housing requirements, and there might be a 35% increase. So it is difficult because we have smaller households. The demand for housing, the affordable housing issues across the South East are significant. One of the issues for this development is to make sure we do secure the 30% affordable housing, and in terms of who the housing's for, the affordable housing that would be provided would be for nominations, housing nominations for people on the waiting list within ADA. It is for local people, but that's only 30%. The other 70% will be sold on the market to whoever is willing to pay what are ever-inflated prices for houses in the area. So a couple of other things then. Thank you for that question. Is there a better way? I mean, the planning system has changed every time, well, probably 10 times, every time there's a new political administration, sorry Tim, there's a change to the planning system. But at the end of the day, you still come back to having a plan, trying to consult the public on the plan, and trying to reconcile development needs with actually, to be honest, most public reaction to development is we don't want it. Because most people will say, well, we've already got deficiencies. We've got deficiencies on our roads, we've got deficiencies in our drainage, we've got deficiencies in terms of GP surgery and getting an appointment with a local doctor. The problem about the planning system and my difficulty in doing the job is that I assess the planning application not on trying to fix the existing deficiencies. All I'm required to do, and the developer knows this, is to try and mitigate the impact of his particular scheme. So it doesn't address, and we had a long meeting on Monday night with Southern Water, all the residents were saying, well, we've got an existing problem, how can you think about accommodating more development? And I know, and it was something I wasn't able to say on Monday night, but I know that all the developer has to show is he's not going to exacerbate the existing situation. He can't solve existing problems. So the planning system, as far as the government is concerned, is failing to deliver enough housing. So I have to say, if the decision at the local level, I'm not saying on this application, but on any application, is to resist development, notwithstanding the views of local residents, as Tim says, is likely to then be made by a government-appointed inspector from Bristol, who will then look at what the housing requirements are, and if we're not supporting, and we are required by government, and not many people do this, but any decision notice, we are required by government to add a note on the end of a decision notice that the local planning authority has proactively tried to support and encourage the development of the land. So we are placed in a position where we should be trying to accommodate and be proactively supporting development. And it's really difficult, and I'm talking to a room full of people who don't want this development. But the reality is we've got to deal with it on its technical merits. We do need more housing. We've got a complete lack of affordable housing in the area. We do need to try and provide more jobs. And we need to try and improve infrastructure. Unfortunately, there is an infrastructure deficit across the country, and particularly in the southeast.
What I'm going to do is take very quick points, because a few people have been before, right at the back, and then I'll just have a couple of minutes responding to that and the A27, because I did fill it as well. Yeah, but can you all be quick, please, because you have had a point before. 1, 2, 3, 4, okay?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
No! Stand up. Just stand up and shout.
I saw the application online and there was no mention on the application for any affordable housing whatsoever. Nothing at all. Now, is that going to be a bargaining point for you to talk to the developer about? We need houses. We desperately need the houses, but there was nothing showing on there. And the other thing I'd like to raise is that apparently all the houses there are going to be leasehold.
Okay, yeah, lady in brown at the back, yeah. Try and get the microphone working.
I'm totally confused now, because Martin comes in here and says there's definitely going to be houses built, there's definitely going to be development on that side, which will have to include IKEA as far as they're concerned as the developer. The council released press releases saying, haven't they done well? They've brought in an IKEA and 600 homes to the area. And basically you're saying, James, I think that it's too late for us to oppose it, because if the local plan gets signed off, it's too late, because the developer, although he says he's got the benefit of the community in mind, will actually sue the council because you're refusing to accept their planning application. So basically, are we saying it's too late? We're going to have to roll over and accept this dreadful, dreadful decision. I mean, please, I just want people to be honest about it.
Yeah. Okay, gentleman in blue. Yeah. And the lady behind you sitting down.
Yeah, I'd like to just ask whether it was possibly a deliberate ploy or whatever not to invite the environment officer tonight, who would actually contradict basically everything Mr. Appleton is saying, in the fact that with areas of AQMAs in the local area and where new Monk's Farm is going to be built, it does not take into consideration the carbon monoxide and other toxins that are going to be produced into the area where there are already unmanageable levels. There's representatives here tonight from area who are the environmental people for the local residents who would have better knowledge than what I will. But they basically, everything is saying, if you build these houses in this area, you are basically going to poison basically the residents and the existing residents who already live in that area.
Okay, and finally the lady behind you.
Hi, I've only lived in Lancing for 9 years, and I chose to live in Lancing because it's a rural village.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and so I actually chose to live in Lancing at the base of the Downs by the river, which was a semi-rural location. You put 600 houses and changed the A27. You might as well make me live in Worthing. That's why I came from Worthing to Lancing. Worthing houses got those houses in Worthing, where I was sitting empty, brand new houses. Why can't we fill those first before we actually build these new houses?
Okay, James.
Right, okay, try and take those in order. The planning system can't control how the developer sells the market housing. So I don't know whether it's going to be freehold or leasehold, and there won't be any controls in the planning system in relation to that. And I know the whole issue of leasehold is a controversial subject at the moment. What the council can control is the requirement for affordable housing, and the local plan does require 30% affordable housing and does seek to ensure that the majority of that affordable housing is rented accommodation, but there will also be shared ownership housing as part of the affordable mix. There is a caveat to that again, it comes back to viability. So what I would say is there is a statement about affordable housing. It's in the planning statement, but I know it's difficult to navigate your way around because I think there's over 1,200 pages supporting the planning application, but the planning statement is a good document to look at, and that will give the breakdown of the mix of the affordable housing that's proposed as part of the application. The next question was, is it a done deal? So let me just try and explain the process in terms of local plans. Local plans have to consider things in enough detail to consider whether the significant impacts of development can be accommodated. And that's why through the local plan we do consult all statutory bodies, and their views are taken into account and put before the local plan inspector. Now, Highways England and West Sussex County Council submitted as part of the local plan that they felt that with a new roundabout on the A27 replacing the Sussex pad, in principle, at a very strategic level, could accommodate the development for 600 dwellings and 10,000 square metres. So the inspector heard that, and to be honest, the inspector then wasn't really interested in further discussions about transport issues. At a strategic level, the local plan is allocating development, but the planning application has to deal with the really detailed and drilling down the detailed aspects of impact on the local environment. Air quality issues have to be looked at, transport issues, and I am aware of a site, not in Ada, but I've dealt in other areas where a site was allocated but was then refused because it was considered that they couldn't address at the detailed planning application stage the impacts on, in that instance, it was traffic. So we have to go through this technical assessment of a very detailed application with environmental impact assessment, and we will have to go through and seek all those more detailed comments. And obviously the applicants have now produced a very detailed transport assessment, which we are going through in considerable detail. And for those that might be aware, you can go on the website and you will see that we've had so far on the application a holding objection from Highways England and an objection from West Sussex. Both are saying there is a lot more supporting information that's necessary, and in particular, the phrase that jumped out at me was they didn't feel there was enough information to assess the worst case scenario on the A27, A259 and local roads, and that more needed to be done. Now, I just need to be realistic that the applicants are then trying to respond to it. And, you know, I'm just trying to explain that at a strategic level, we put a best foot forward in terms of how much growth we think that the district can cater for. That is being challenged. We think we got the balance right.